More rocks reporting from down under. I just want to report briefly on an article, a very good article by Max Blumenthal of grayzone.com. It's entitled US Regime Change Blueprint Proposed Venezuelan Electricity Blackouts as Watershed Event for Galvanizing Public Interest. The US canvas organization that trained Juan Guaido and his allies produced a 2010 memo on exploiting electricity outages and urged the opposition to take advantage of the situation towards their needs. And this is from the article itself. A September 2010 memo by a US-funded soft power organization that helped train Venezuelan coup leader Juan Guaido and his allies identifies the potential collapse of the country's electrical sector as a watershed event that would likely have the event of galvanizing public unrest in a way that no opposition group could ever hope to generate. The memo has special relevance today as Guaido moves to exploit nationwide blackouts caused by a major failure at the Simon Bolivar hydroelectric plant at Guri Dam, a crisis that Venezuela's government blames on US sabotage. It was authored by Sridhar Popovich at the Center for Applied Nonviolent Action and Strategies, Canvas, a Belgrade-based democracy promotion organization funded by the US government that has trained thousands of US-aligned youth activists in countries where the West seeks regime change. So this group reportedly hosted Guaido and the key leaders of his Popular Will Party for a series of training sessions, fashioning them into a Generation 2007 determined to foment resistance to then President Hugo Chavez and sabotage his plans to implement 21st century socialism in Venezuela. In the 2010 Canvas memo, Popovich declared a key to Chavez's current weakness is the decline in the electricity sector. Popovich explicitly identified the Simon Bolivar hydroelectric plant as a friction point, emphasizing that water levels at the Guri Dam are dropping and Chavez has been unable to reduce consumption sufficiently to compensate for the deteriorating industry. Speculating on a grave possibility that some 70% of the country's electricity grid could go dark as soon as April 2010, the Canvas leader stated that an opposition group would be best served to take advantage of the situation and spin it against Chavez and towards their needs. And then he gives an extract from the actual memo itself. Flash forward to March 2019, and the scenario outlined by Popovich is playing out almost exactly as he had imagined. On March the 7th, just days before Guaido's return from Colombia, where he participated in the failed and demonstrably violent February 23rd attempt to ram a shipment of US aid across the Venezuelan border, the Simon Bolivar hydroelectric plant experienced a major and still unexplained collapse. Days later, electricity remains sporadic across the country. Meanwhile, Guaido has done everything he can to, quote, take advantage of the situation and spin it, unquote, against President Nicolas Maduro, just as his allies were urged to do over 8 years ago before by Canvas. Rubio vows a period of suffering for Venezuela hours before the blackout. The Venezuelan government has placed the blame squarely on Washington, accusing it of sabotage through a cyber attack on its electrical infrastructure. Key players in the US-directed coup attempt have done little to dispel the accusation. In a tweet on March the 8th, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo framed the electricity outage as a pivotal stage in US plans for regime. So he says, first of all, Maduro's no food, no medicine, now no power, next, no Maduro. And then he comes back later saying, Maduro's policies bring nothing but darkness. At noon on March the 7th, during a hearing on Venezuela at the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee, Senator Marco Rubio explicitly called for the US to stir widespread unrest, declaring that it needs to happen in order to achieve climate change. Venezuela is going to enter a period of suffering no nation in our hemisphere has confronted in modern history, Rubio proclaimed. Around 5 p.m., the Simon Bolivar hydroelectric plant experienced a total and still unexplained collapse. Residents of Caracas and throughout Venezuela were immediately plunged into darkness. At 5:18, a clearly excited Rubio took to Twitter to announce the blackout and claim that backup generators have failed. It was unclear how Rubio had obtained such specific information so soon after the outage occurred. According to Jorge Rodriguez, the communications minister of Venezuela, local authorities themselves did not know if backup generators had failed at the time of Rubio's tweet. Back in Caracas, Guaido immediately set out to exploit the situation, just as his canvas trainers had advised over 8 years before. Taking to Twitter just an hour after Rubio, Guaido declared, "The light will return when the usurpation of Maduro ends." Like Pompeo, the self-declared president framed the blackouts as part of a regime change strategy, not an accident or error. 2 days later, Guaido was at the center of opposition rally he convened in affluent eastern Caracas, bellowing into a megaphone. Article 187, when the time comes, we need to be on the streets, mobilized. It depends on us, not on anybody else. Article 187 establishes the right of the National Assembly to, quote, to authorize the use of Venezuelan military missions abroad or foreign in the country. Upon his mention of the constitutional article, Guaido's supporters responded, "Intervention! Intervention!" So, exploiting crisis to get back into a position of power. As Dan Cohen and I reported here at the Grey Zone, Guaido's rise to prominence and the coup plot that he has been appointed to oversee is the product of a decade-long project overseen by the Belgrade-based Canvas outfit. Canvas is a spin-off of Otpor, a Serbian protest group founded by Srđan Popović in 1998 at the University of Belgrade. Otpor, which means resistance in Serbian, was the student group that worked alongside US soft power organizations to mobilize the protests that eventually toppled the Serbian president Slobodan Milosevic. Canvas has been funded through the National Endowment for Democracy, a CIA cutout that functions as the US government's main arm of promoting regime change. According to leaked internal emails from Stratfor, an intelligence firm known as the Shadow CIA, Canvas may also have received CIA funding and training during the 1999-2000 anti-Milosevic struggle. A leaked email from a Stratfor staffer noticed that after they ousted Milosevic, quote, the kids who ran Otpor grew up, got suits, and designed Canvas, or in other words, a exporter revolution group that sowed the seeds for a number of colour revolutions. They're still hooked into US funding and basically go around the world trying to topple dictators and autocratic governments, ones that the US doesn't like. Stratfor subsequently revealed that Canvas turned its attention to Venezuela in 2005 after training opposition movements that led pro-NATO regime change operations across Eastern Europe. In September 2010, as Venezuela headed for a parliamentary election, Canvas produced a series of memos outlining the plans they had hatched with non-formal actors like Guaido and his cadre student activists to bring down Chavez. Quote, this is the first opportunity for the opposition to get back into a position of power, unquote, Popovich wrote at the time. In his memo on electricity outages, Popovich highlighted the importance of the Venezuelan military in achieving regime change. Quote, alliances with the military could be critical because in such a situation of massive public unrest and rejection of the presidency, unquote, the Canvas founder wrote, malcontent sectors of the military will likely decide to intervene, but only if they believe that they have sufficient support. While the scenario Popovich envisioned failed to materialize in 2010, it perfectly describes the situation gripping Venezuela today as an opposition leader cultivated by Canvas seeks to spin the crisis against Maduro while calling on the military to break the ranks. Since the Grey Zone exposed the deep ties between Canvas and Guaido's Popular Will Party, Popovich has attempted to publicly distance himself from his record of training Venezuela's opposition. Today, however, Popovich's 2010 memo on exploiting electricity outages reads like a blueprint for the strategy that Guaido and his patrons in Washington have actively implemented. Whether or not the blackout is the result of external sabotage, it represents the watershed event that Canvas has prepared its Venezuelan cadres for. So that's basically it. It's enough for me. Seymour Rocks from Down Under.